everyone, welcome back to Velvet Moments. Tonight we're not simply revisiting a BTS OT7 Weverse live. Tonight we're stepping into the quiet space between smiles and silences, into the emotions that never reached the microphones, yet lingered heavily in the room on January 16, 2026. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments are not spoken. They are felt. That night was meant to be simple. 7 familiar faces. One room filled with warmth. Laughter echoing softly as memories were shared and jokes flowed effortlessly. An OT7 Weverse live. Something BTS and ARMY had cherished for years. Comforting. Safe. Familiar. A moment where everything seemed perfectly balanced. And for most people watching, it was exactly that. But beneath the cheerful surface there was a subtle shift. An emotion quietly unfolding, one that lived only in Jungkook's heart. From the very beginning of the live, the energy felt light. Taehyung's presence was warm and relaxed, his voice steady, his smile easy. Jimin sat beside him, radiant and open, laughing freely, leaning in without hesitation. Their shoulders brushed naturally, their laughter overlapping in a way that spoke of years spent growing up together. To anyone else it was nothing unusual. Just friendship. Just comfort. Just two people who had known each other for a very long time. But Jungkook felt it. He was there too. Present, smiling, engaging with ARMY as he always did. His voice was calm. His expressions gentle. But his eyes kept returning to one place. Again and again. As if drawn by something he couldn't control. Jimin. Every small movement registered in Jungkook's chest. The way Jimin leaned closer when Taehyung whispered something. The way Jimin laughed just a little longer when Taehyung teased him. The casual touch on Jimin's arm. The brief moments where the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them. None of it was dramatic. None of it was wrong. Yet each detail pressed softly against Jungkook's heart, creating a quiet ache that refused to disappear. He tried to distract himself. He nodded when Namjoon spoke. Smiled at Jin's jokes. Read comments, answered questions, laughed at the right moments. On the screen Jungkook looked the same as always, kind, attentive, steady. But inside something was unraveling. His jaw tightened without him noticing. The hand resting on his lap curled slowly into a fist. His breathing grew shallow for reasons he couldn't explain. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was fear. Jungkook had always known about the bond Jimin and Taehyung shared. He respected it deeply. They were soul-connected in a way only years of shared struggles could create. Jungkook understood that. He accepted it. But that night the feeling was heavier. Maybe it was the distance that had grown over time. Maybe it was longing that had gone unspoken for too long. Or maybe it was the quiet terror of realizing how deeply his heart depended on one person, how fragile that dependence made him feel. Then came the moment that tipped everything over. Taehyung said something playful, something that made Jimin burst into laughter. Without thinking, Jimin leaned his head against Taehyung's shoulder. It lasted barely a second. A fleeting gesture. Something easy. Something instinctive. But the camera caught it. The comments section erupted. And Jungkook felt his chest tighten as he swallowed hard, forcing his smile to stay intact. His gaze dropped for just a moment, just long enough to breathe, before he lifted his eyes back to the screen. Something inside him shifted. An urge rose quietly but powerfully. To move closer. To interrupt. To reclaim the invisible space that felt like it was slipping away. Without fully realizing it, Jungkook leaned forward and spoke, his voice slightly louder than before, deliberately entering the conversation between Jimin and Taehyung. Jimin turned. Their eyes met. And then, there it was. That smile. The one that always softened Jungkook's edges. The one that felt like home. The one that reminded him why he endured feelings he never spoke out loud. But that night, even that smile wasn't enough to fully calm him. Because moments later Jimin drifted back again. Not intentionally. Not carelessly. Just naturally, being exactly who he had always been. Warm. Affectionate. Open with his heart. And that was what hurt the most. Jungkook knew Jimin wasn't doing anything wrong. He knew jealousy had no logic. No fairness. It arrived quietly and settled deep, twisting emotions that Jungkook had tried so hard to keep buried. As the live continued, Jungkook grew quieter. He listened more than he spoke. His laughter softened into small smiles. To ARMY he might have seemed calm. Tired maybe. Reflective. No one could see the storm inside him. The fear of losing something precious without ever having claimed it. The ache of loving too deeply in silence. Then Jimin noticed. A brief glance. A subtle pause. Eyes narrowing slightly with concern. Jungkook caught the look and smiled wider than he felt, lifting his shoulders as if everything was fine. Jimin didn't ask. But something changed. The distance shifted. Jimin's body turned slightly inward. His glances toward Jungkook grew more frequent. Small, quiet checks as if reassuring himself that Jungkook was still there. And Jungkook noticed. He always did. As the live drew closer to its end, Jungkook spoke more again. His voice sounded brighter. The atmosphere returned to warmth and laughter. But the jealousy never fully disappeared. It simply hid itself, waiting for the quiet. When the cameras finally turned off, the world exhaled. No comments. No screens. Just 7 people sharing the same space. Jimin moved first. Without a word, he sat beside Jungkook, their shoulders brushing gently. A simple touch. Light. Almost unnoticeable. But to Jungkook it meant everything. What's wrong? Jimin asked softly, his voice low enough that only Jungkook could hear. Jungkook looked down, then shook his head. Nothing. Jimin smiled faintly, unconvinced but patient. You seem different. Jungkook inhaled slowly. There were 1,000 words inside him, feelings tangled too tightly to release. Instead he turned and met Jimin's eyes. And Jimin understood. He leaned closer, just enough to close the space. Just enough to remind Jungkook where he belonged. That jealousy had never truly been about Taehyung. It was about fear. Fear of losing the quiet moments. Fear of not being the place Jimin returned to. Fear of loving someone so deeply that even harmless moments could hurt. The night ended without confessions. Without explanations. Without confrontation. Only silence filled with understanding. And Jungkook knew, deep in his chest, that his feelings were too real to deny. Too strong to ignore. Even jealousy arriving quietly only confirmed one truth. His heart had always been with Jimin. And it always would be. Hello everyone, thank you for being here with Velvet Moments. Tonight's story reminds us that some emotions don't need to be spoken. They live in glances, in silences, and in hearts that care too deeply to say a word. This is Velvet Moments, and we'll see you in the next story.